Welcome back to the Blue Chip Academy podcast, to the Blueprint to Success interview series, providing unique blueprints, tactical knowledge, best practices to navigate the critical points in the football ecosystem so athletes and parents can prepare a plan to a career path that any athlete can bank on. So our next guest, Super Bowl champion, 8-year NFL vet and entrepreneur, also a great Penn State alum. His professional journey has gone many firsts, right? Like he's Super Bowl record for the longest punt return, 61 yards, and Super Bowl 50 as an entrepreneur. Guest founded the Whitelist ACEs NFT, a decentralized community that allows users to collect and trade unique digital assets with innovative utility usages. I'm excited to dive into this blueprint, man. Dynamic entrepreneur and football player, my old roommate, Penn State great, and 8-year NFL vet. Let's welcome Jordan Norwood.
Hey, Jess, appreciate the welcome, man. And it's great to be on this podcast with you, brother. Thanks for having me.
Man, appreciate you jumping on, man. It's like love telling the different stories and just always talk about everybody's path is different, right? I come in, I'm talking about it's Blue Chip Academy. We talking about being a desirable asset. Sometimes coming from the 5-star standpoint, it's just like, everyone thinks it's like, a matter of the rankings of going through the process, but no, there's like critical factors that regardless of where you go through, you can maximize this elite sports ecosystem in the best way that fits you, right? So trying to equip these guys with the codes and tools to kind of get an acceleration plan through this process. And you're one of the prime examples that I've seen going through the sports ecosystem. And I was like, okay, he gets it. And like how you were moving different things. So try to get this opportunity to give it back a little bit. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I met Jordan when I was getting recruited to Penn State. His dad was Coach Norwood, safeties coach my time at Penn State. And he also had a unique perspective on the intricacies of sports business. I was a coach's kid coming up, an athletic director's kid. And so as a kid going through the process, right, growing up, understanding it from a different perspective, I know I did. I can go into how you felt. What advice would you give to a prospect going through the process, knowing the business from your perspective, with your dad being a coach?
Yeah, I think both you and I had really unique, upbringings when it comes to sports. For me, obviously, like you said, my dad was a college football coach, still is. And so I was somebody that was on road trips. Like, hey, Dad, can I get, one of your little, he used to have these notebooks, like real physical notebooks that you would turn the pages and they have the guard, center, tackle. Can I get your notebook so I can start drawing some plays? And me and my older brother, Gabe, we would just, on a road trip, we would just be drawing plays. I would draw an offensive play. He would draw a defensive play. We'd line them up next to each other and be like, hey, I would have scored on that one. So it's just little interactions like that, I didn't think twice about, but obviously that's not something that many kids are doing. I was doing that when I was first, second grade, knew what a cover 2 defense was and, new routes in a route tree. But I say that to say nowadays that information is accessible. There's, you can get in touch with a college coach or an athlete like myself and find that information out, which probably wasn't as accessible when we were growing up. I don't know how I would have known that if my dad weren't a college football coach. So the advice with that is, go get the information because it's out there, whether it's watching YouTube videos or even just playing the video game and really looking at what these plays are on the video game. It's helpful.
Understanding the schematics of the game. And that's like real interesting that you said it, because I used to draw plays and all that different things as well. But like going through that process, and you talking about going on road trips, moving around, not really stationary in a place to like kind of build your brand and throughout the recruiting process. So like jumping into the recruiting process as a coach's kid, how did that affect you going through the process? Because as a coach's kid, you're similar to like an Army brat to an extent.
Yeah, absolutely. It was interesting, to be honest. So for me in high school, I went to my first couple years of high school in Texas, where my dad was coaching at Texas Tech. And then we moved up to State College, and I finished up my high school career there. So my recruiting process was, it was interesting. I actually didn't even play football my junior year. I got hurt. So I didn't play until my senior year. My dad, who was coaching at Penn State, intentionally decided to stay out of the recruiting process. So when they would look at recruits in meetings, he wouldn't mention my name at all. So it was more of Joe Paterno actually was vouching for me and kind of on my side. Same with Jay. And then there was coaches and staff that weren't. They were like, why would we even look at recruiting him? I was 145 pounds my senior year of high school. More of a basketball player than a football player. We had won the state championship in basketball the year before. So it was a really interesting recruiting dynamic. And, obviously I ended up at Penn State. I ended up gray shirting, basically at Coach Paterno's request. Not request, but, he made that happen. It wasn't my dad. It wasn't many of the assistant coaches weren't really high on me. But other than Penn State, I just had, D2 and D3 opportunities. If it weren't Penn State, I probably would have went to Bucknell and played football and basketball.
Wow. That's interesting. You say you go to Bucknell and play basketball and football. So that's the type of athlete we're talking about. So it's kind of dynamic when you're saying like, all right, I'm undersized and all this, but I can go here and play basketball and football. So that just kind of shows, we'll get into that, but that's the type of athlete Jordan was. Can you talk a little bit about gray shirting? Because I don't know if kids or athletes kind of understand that, because guys now reclassify from a new grade and go back when there's like prep years where IMG has like a mid-year season. Talk about the gray shirt time. From that standpoint, we have to kind of wait before you come into school.
So basically what my gray shirt process was, well, first of all, the reason that I gray shirted was because I was undersized. And it could have been something on the scholarship numbers also, but like I said, I was, 145 pounds coming out of high school my senior year. So that first fall, which would have been 2004, sorry. So I graduated high school spring 2004. The fall 2004, I was not a full-time student. I went to Penn State. I paid my own tuition and books and room and board, but I was just a part-time student. So my clock with the NCAA clearinghouse didn't start yet. But that spring, spring would have been 2005 semester. That's when I was put on full scholarship. That's when I, went on campus and I think that's when we started living together. Maybe it could have been.
I think that's when we all got there.
Yeah. Yeah, because you started in the spring too. Is that right?
Yeah, I started in the spring. Yep.
Right. So yeah, that's basically the process. So spring, I start spring ball. The next fall, fall 2005, I could have again redshirted at that point. So I gray shirted, and then I could have redshirted again, but I ended up playing. So, and I ended up putting on 20 pounds also, which was useful.
That developmental time is very important. Did you have any doubts going into Penn State? Because like that's a pretty big range, right? We talk about either going to Bucknell or Penn State. Like it's not like you were saying, I'm going here or Ohio State or here or Pitt. You know what I mean? So how was your confidence level going into Penn State, knowing that if you weren't there, you'd be at Bucknell?
Yeah, I wasn't super confident, to be honest. I was very aware that I was, 40 pounds away from where a typical college receiver should be, and 3 inches away also. So I was pretty aware of what was going on. For me, it was there was a coach at Penn State, the receivers coach prior to me getting there was Kenny Carter. And at a Penn State, 7-on-7 camp, Kenny Carter pulled me aside. This is the summer going into my senior year, I believe. He pulled me aside and said, Jordan, you have the skill level to play Division I football. I just want you to know that. And so it's literally that short, super short conversation. It wasn't even a conversation. He just said that and kept it moving. And I don't know I don't know why he said that to me, but that was the only thing I needed to hear for me to take the chance on myself. And even, I didn't have the confidence in myself to succeed really. It took somebody like the wide receivers coach at Penn State to tell me that that I was good enough. And, you know, I mean, I had my dad telling me I was good enough, but it doesn't,
Right.
it doesn't
It
hit the
doesn't
same.
feel the same. It's like, Dad, come on, man. I know you're going to tell
Right.
me I'm. Yeah, that's a great point, because I mean, we're talking about you being undersized and all those different things, and sometimes people shape this story in their mind about undersized players and different things of that nature. I'm just saying, I always try to balance it out. It was like, you got to recognize like purple dot players, which we call, you know, the guys that may be undersized and have an elite skill set, but they have like a redeeming
Sure.
quality of elite trait. So everything that Jordan's saying, his basketball team in high school, like they won the state championship in PA. So like he was like a key contributor. So we talk about just athletic ability. Right. I knew you from playing basketball, right? Just like a level of quickness and seeing you playing against that. How did that come up in the process? Do you think that's what kind of coaches saw where you like, man, you have the skill set to play at the next level? Or did you lean on that skill set? I mean, I guess like, I know I got elite quickness or body control and different things of that nature.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, tangibly in the recruiting process, you know, I didn't play much football. I mean, you know, going into my junior year or going into my senior year, I hadn't played my junior year. And then even my senior year of high school, I actually broke my thumb the very first game of the season trying to tackle LaShawn McCoy. I broke my thumb. And, you know, so I had a cast on my hand, didn't play receiver. I still played defense that season, but didn't play receiver up until, you know, the last 2 or 3 games of the season, my senior year. So a lot of what like Jay Paterno, Kermit Buggs, a lot of the reason that they were high on me coming to Penn State as a football player was because what they saw on the basketball court. And you can see the quickness, you can see the hand-eye coordination. But another thing you can see is the toughness and, you know, I guess the way I played defense and the way I went after loose balls on the basketball court. I mean, it all translates.
Absolutely. And like, just so we know, Jordan had bunnies and he would dunk on you, like if he had to.
That too.
That too, right? We talking about the other side. So like, when I have that context, man, because, you know, I would argue with coaches about stuff. Like a player might be undersized and they'll like throw a profile out there. And I'm like, nope. That's not it. Like, you don't know what that type of athleticism at that size is supposed to look like, right? Like, or whatever it may be. Like, if someone lacks a level of top end speed, and how does that, the ratio to body control, short area quickness, hands, and all those other things balance it out? And it's just like, be surprised when cats are like, oh, but X. I'm like, nah, I know what that looks like, man. Because me and Dion were talking about like that undersized thing. It's just like, man, these dudes is taking everybody up top and it always open. So jumping into like college, man. So you weren't technically local going to Penn State, which is like, people don't know. It's a unique ecosystem, right? In college football, you're in the middle of central Pennsylvania, but you were one of the few people that kind of came from that area that senior year. How was that transition going to high school and state college and then kind of going across the street to Penn State?
Yeah, I mean, it was an easier transition than
was there a transition
for
at
me. It wasn't much of a transition, you know. I mean, I was coming home 2 or 3 times a week, you know, eating at home. I was still seeing my parents, you know, and for me as a, you know, kind of a more quiet kid, as you know, I don't know if the transition would have been as smooth had I gone anywhere else, you know, even if I went to Penn State, but went to a branch campus, right? Like, it's that physical, geographical, you know, nearness that I had to my family and, you know, and my siblings that made the transition a little easier for me. So, so that part definitely helped. I don't know if things would have turned out the way they did had I gone further away. That
makes a good point, man. Just from the standpoint of not that super transition period that a lot of guys go through when they get to Penn State, whether they're coming from DC, Virginia Beach, and it's just like whether it's a culture shock, trying to get in, you know, understanding the mechanisms around the campus. But a lot of people that do come from state college and transition into Penn State typically have success and transition to the next level. Sure. We can go through it. You got you, Nate Stupar, and then you have, you know, there's just other guys that come from state college that people don't know that they're successful. And I think that's like something that you point out from a critical factor, just like the comfort, right? Because we always talk about when guys pick schools, like you can go to a school and make an emotional decision like, oh, this university, the food, this, that, and the third, and you get there and right outside the ecosystem, it's like, I'm from the East Coast and I'm in, I don't know, New Mexico or something. It's just like different beyond that. And it's like that. I've seen a lot of guys, even when I started working back at Penn State, where the culture almost the culture of the surrounding area kind of inhibits them from being comfortable and being able to perform on the field, and just giving that real evaluation, self-evaluation of like knowing who you are and like what ecosystem you feel comfortable in, because it's pretty dynamic when you get into these college ecosystems,
right,
specifically. So, man, did you have a welcome to Penn State moment?
On the football field, definitely.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You get there.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah. My welcome to Penn State, there's probably two of them. One was, one of our first practices my freshman year, during preseason camp, at the stadium. I was catching punts just on like this, on the scout team, and Tamba Hali just run straight through me like I wasn't even there. And Tamba, just like I do, he did it on accident. He literally didn't see me, but he was running full speed. He's like super apologetic, helping me off the ground, peeling me off the ground. So that's number one. And then just from the standpoint of, what it takes to make it through preseason camp, just my welcome to Penn State, welcome to Joe Paterno moment was tweaking my hamstring, and Joe just walking through the training room and just tearing me up, calling me, all of the sorts of names that he thought would motivate me to get up off the training room table and back into practice. But those two things are just memories that I have that I'll cherish, and kind of laugh at looking back. But both of those moments made me want to quit football.
That's funny because I'll talk me to hitting. I mean, that's definitely one. I mean, I remember we played Florida State in that game. That was so physical. I was like, man, put me on defense, dog. These players are hitting, man. But that point that you're talking about when you get hurt in college football, man, it's like a real mental warfare. It's like a whole different thing, and how the intention kind of shifts. The rehab process is hard. Like it's you feel bad mentally, physically, everything's kind of there. It's just like, you ready yet? No? All right. Like, see, you know what I mean? It's just that, I know that was tough for me because I hurt my foot when I got there in the spring, and it was just like, man, this is
nothing
real.
Like being on those fan bikes with JT during practice.
Shout out JT and Jeremy and all the boys and B. You guys always used to put us through it. It made us strong now. It's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you once you were at Penn State and you kind of were looking around at everyone else, did you like notice that you had any critical advantages from being local and having your dad on staff?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were some tangible advantages, even from the off the field, kind of having that support system, readily available. I mean, I remember sitting outside the locker room after practice specifically during two-a-days, just like, man, is this for me? This is difficult. This is hard, right? And so, yeah, being able to walk down the hall and knock on my dad's door and be like, is it going to get easier? Like, or what's going on? That's an incredible advantage, right? And so there's that part. And then in terms of the actual football, I definitely looked around and realized pretty quickly that I had some skill sets that Kenny Carter was right. I can play at this level. Even though I'm 150 pounds, 160 pounds at that point, there's ways my skill set leans itself to succeeding. As long as somebody doesn't get their hands on me, which I'm pretty good at avoiding, then I'll be all right. But once Alan Zamitis got his hands on me, it was a big issue. The whole play was shut down for me.
Hey, see, man, that's funny. You come back in because like those guys were used to battle in practice and all that, and like just to give context, what you're saying, like it wasn't that camp wasn't a normal camp. Like that first 05 camp, we went to the Orange Bowl because they were. I mean, come to find out, they were trying to break us, right? Because they knew we had to play, and like the older guys were getting ready to do what they needed to do. But that was definitely one of the hardest camps of my football career. I mean,
right.
I can't even talk about what we were doing. Whatever. It was a lot of running. Let's just say that we were running. But he took care of us through the season, man. Like, hey, got 46 minutes on the field. Go fast. Boom, boom, boom. Get up out of there. So we were fresh, ready to go. So we get into the NIL stuff, man. In college, we had like a unique little group, man. What would have been your NIL strategy in college, given like the climate that it is today?
Oh man, what a question.
Just get the idea circulated for some of the guys that might be listening, because we saw a lot of different avenues when we were there, man. Because I always wish we had a serious group licensing opportunity with that Fab Four our freshman year, when everybody was going off. People were selling. They pretty much branded it that way already. We could have did anything, but I know you always had the entrepreneurial spirit.
We probably would have been. I mean, so first of all, you mentioned the Fab Four. I know that you've talked about probably the ESPN the magazine article. I think all of that leans itself to Rock Nation. Like, we would have been involved with Jay-Z, Rockaware. We already had Larry Johnson, who was just coming out of Penn State, who was all the way in with Rock Nation. So, us throwing up this little dynasty symbol in the ESPN the magazine, that would have came with a few dollars and cents. Would have made a lot of sense. So.
I forgot we were throwing up the dynasty sign. I mean, it was heavy in there too.
You're right. I think we were. I mean, we were all about it.
I looked at the picture. Yeah, I know Dion was for sure. He was strong with it.
Right.
But, no, that's real.
Yeah, we would have had Jay-Z and Beyonce sitting, 50-yard line or on the field at our games. Definitely.
So you guys know, like, that's the type of movie it was when we were kind of coming in that freshman year. It was a scene, man. It was a time. What a time to be alive. Like, what are your thoughts on the NIL, like the regulation of everything that's going on?
Well, I mean, I love it. I mean, as a whole, generally speaking, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but I do feel like things need to be reeled in, regulation wise. I mean, it's just, I think more so for the safety of young men and women who are, who have a high earning potential as they should. But the safety of, people taking advantage of them financially, or doing something with their name, image, likeness that, that can harm them down the road. So I do think that more regulation is needed and will come, but I think these student athletes deserve their piece of the pie.
For sure, and that's like the double-edged sword of everything, right? As soon as we got into the space of athletes getting money, at the end of the day, it becomes the free market. So you kind of, it's the bad things that come with the free market and the good things that come with the free market. You're not a lot of guys. One thing that I noticed from working in college sports was like a lot of guys think they're more valuable than they are, right? So you got to balance that, where it's like, hey, there's not that opportunity there. You have to kind of build your own brand. And just like, to be honest with you, just the support within football programs to kind of handle that and everything and like balance the stuff on the field. It is pretty dynamic and loose, and it leaves those spaces for the pariahs of different, agencies, and everything starts to trickle down because now you got guys getting represented in high school. So like the stuff that guys were dealing with, we were dealing with runners in college, high school cats at, top high schools now are dealing with it. And it's just, it's an intro into the business in a real way. If you're not, buttoned up tight, and go some different ways. But so at your time at Penn State and you get ready to leave, everybody has that different transition to the NFL. Some people get drafted, some people, do the free agency route. Can you talk to me a little about your transition into the NFL?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, first of all, I mean, it probably wasn't until like kind of towards the end of my junior year, into my senior year, that I even was thinking NFL or realized that was, a tangible next step for me. When you and forgive me because I don't even remember the exact process, but when you're like starting to, or allowed to shop for agents or allowed to declare for the NFL, right, early, and people are asking, is Justin going to leave early? I'm like, oh goodness. I mean, I guess, if Justin should be thinking about leaving early, I guess I should at least be thinking about going to the NFL after my senior year, right? So yeah, it just for whatever reason, it wasn't like readily available in my head, but yeah, what ended up happening with me Ended up going undrafted. By the time my senior year rolled around, I was still undersized. I was, fighting for 170 pounds. But still, I mean, like a 4'6", 40 guy, so not super fast either. I didn't have any of the measurables, basically. The bench press wasn't measurable at all. I couldn't even.
What were your measurables going into the NFL, like your official measurables, like when they came to do the combine?
I think my combine time on the 40 was like a 4.56.
Okay.
At my pro day, I ended up running a 4.48.
Okay.
I don't know who timed that, but I haven't been able to duplicate that one at any point. As far as bench press, I still to this day have never bench pressed 225, not even once. So I have never even done that before. So that was not even, there's just a line crossed out through that one.
And the height and weight?
The height and weight, I was 5'10", like one. Probably by the time combine came around, I think I was closer to 175. So yeah, not super fat. My quickness was good.
I mean, you're going to downplay the quickness because it'd be 5'10", 170, and play 8 years in the NFL. We got it. Sure. There's something that you're leaving out. So we're going to get into that a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I had a 39-inch vertical. And then I didn't do the 3-cone at the combine, but my 3-cone was really good. I want to say like 4.2. Is that a good 3-cone?
Something
or
like
it might have been sub 4 even. Yeah, okay. I think it was 3.9, but I didn't want to overshoot. I think I had a 3.9, like a 3.95 3-cone or a 4-cone. So yeah, obviously. Yeah. I don't even know what the good numbers are, but
I mean, it's getting the job done at the end of the day, man. So like you get to the NFL, everything's moving around. You had your second stint at Cleveland, you end up with Denver. Take me through that season, like playing there with Peyton and that whole thing, and then obviously the punt return in the Super Bowl. Like, I mean, we're talking about like moments that you dream of as a kid. Like take me through that, because you're talking about a 5'10" guy that's 170 pounds, like you said, 4'6", and like the different obstacles to get into the NFL. Now you get to this point. What year was that? Year 6 for you?
Yeah, it was year 7.
Year seven, and you get to year 7. It's like now you're in this moment. Can you take me through that a little bit? Yeah,
I mean, it's certainly a blessing, and like you said, times that I'll never forget, specifically Super Bowl. But going into year 7, I hadn't even played a whole lot of football still at that point. I had done, a year and a half on the practice squad in Cleveland and Philadelphia. I had been active in Cleveland a couple years. I spent 2 years on an injured reserve on IR in Cleveland and in Denver. I had spent a year out of football completely just from getting cut and not picked up. So even by the time that year came around, I'm still fighting for a roster spot. I obviously make the team and, line up week 1, first play of the season with Peyton Manning at the quarterback and Demarius and Emmanuel Sanders at the other receivers. So I'm just now feeling like, 7 years into my NFL career, that I've actually, made it, so that whole season was incredible. And then to, eventually go to the Super Bowl and not be the starting punt returner the entire season, not be the starting punt returner going into the Super Bowl game either. It was Emmanuel Sanders, and, he kind of just, that particular play, he was like, hey, we have a punt block on. So, Jordan, you want to go back and get this one, which is kind of the way it goes, I don't have the jurisdiction to go put myself in the game, but somebody like Emmanuel Sanders, can bow out and say, hey, I want to focus on this last drive of the half, which is something that happens as a punt returner. It's hard to focus on catching a punt if you have important offensive plays coming up. Punt returning is just one of those positions you need to be locked in.
All the way.
All the way, right. So anyways, I go back there in place of Emmanuel. And, like Emmanuel said, it was a punt block. So it was likely going to be a fair catch and should have been a fair catch maybe in retrospect. But, I thought I had a little bit more time than I didn't fair catch it. And the Carolina Panthers, the coverage team all assumed that I fair caught it because there was about 6 of them around me. But, caught the ball, took a little bump and, just ran for it. And, ends up being the longest punt return in Super Bowl history, which is pretty cool, even though I didn't score. But it's a fun play, a fun memory.
No, that's a great memory. That'd be fun, man. It's like you playing 8 years in the league is so rare. So first of all, congrats on a great career. What would you attribute, to the beating the odds and the success rates in the NFL and end up making it 8 years? You see a lot of different people, whether get injured, whether it's things outside of the field, kind of get distracted and then kind of, take away sharpening your skills and continue to get better. And then you got, just injuries sometimes. What would you think attribute to your success of 8 years?
Yeah, well, I think part of it, to be honest, is being undrafted, to be frank. I think had I gotten drafted, which I wanted so badly at the time, the expectation would have been higher out of me. My price tag as a player would have been higher throughout my career. So actually, being undrafted is actually something that allowed me to, I played at the minimum salary pretty much all my entire career up until my final season. So being a cheap player was something that worked to my advantage. And then in terms of the type of player I was, just being very coachable, going back to being a coach's kid and always, almost being a second quarterback on the field, breaking the huddle. And if, another receiver needed to know what to do, they usually asked me instead of asking Peyton or, whoever the quarterback was. So having another person on the field that, knew the X's and O's and, could help from that standpoint was advantageous. And then just when it comes to skill set, just being consistent for the most part, being somebody that, could catch the football, could get open on third down. Having that skill set is something that, pushed my career along because, typically somebody says, special teams, undrafted, you got to play special teams. I actually didn't play special teams until my last year in the NFL. I wasn't at gunner. I couldn't do gunner. I wasn't strong enough. I would get pushed out of bounds into the other team's water station. The only thing that I was useful for on special teams was punt return and kick return. And I just didn't do those things. I was useful for it, but I was useful in a backup role. I just wasn't fast enough to be the starter. And I didn't do that until my last year. So
that's big that you touched on. Like that elite intelligence will keep you in the league, right? Being able to do those different things and having the coaches trust that you're going to be where you want to be. Like I don't think a lot of general public understands that, coaches, they look at the game almost like scientists, right? So like when they're trying to put their experiments together, like they want the things to react the way that they have it drawn up. And that's like the first level of even being able to get on the field if you're not considered special, right? Like, you got your special guys that don't really have to, they break all the rules, not break technically the rules, but the rules of a defense, whatever is right, wrong, players make plays and all that good stuff. But the more you can do too, right? When you talk about in the league, being a person that you can come to, that all the plays, you're doing different positions. And like you said, not playing special teams, but being that value add where it's like, well, I'm comfortable if this person goes out, we know he's going to catch the ball, he's going to do X, Y, and Z and move along accordingly. So I think that's a big piece that people need to understand, even when you get to that professional space, college space, and high school, is like being that desirable asset. And that means continuing to sharpen those different aspects in your game on and off the field because, looking for any reason to get rid of you at that point, right? We'll start to get year 6 or 7. So it's like you bring that value, man. It's a big piece. We're going to do a quick read. 1 second here.
Cool.
This quick read. Yeah, this episode of Blueprint to Success interview series is brought to you by LIG Sports Group, an executive sports consulting firm where we focus on the proactive talent acquisition, specialty sourcing, strategic strategic partnerships in business development and career development and consulting, mastering the different critical points of the sports ecosystem, starting in high school, college, and the corporate ranks with executive talent acquisition services. So you guys just check in, anything you need, doing free consults for the recruiting process and Blue Chip Academy, and the link will be below. And we are jumping back into it. Yeah, man. So we just talk about like the transition and everything from the post-football, entrepreneurial journey. How was the transition from the game for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I'm still transitioning. I don't know that. I'm not sure that there'll ever be a definitive moment where I'm, beyond sports or beyond my playing career. There's always, something that I lean on, whether it's a relationship for my playing career or an actual skill set that, that I need. So yeah, I finished playing officially 2017. 2016 was my last season playing. Officially retired, I guess, in the spring of 2017. So nearly 5 years ago, or more than 5 years ago now, which is crazy. But yeah, a lot of my transition for me has been, generally speaking, moving away from involvement with football. I didn't get into coaching or being an agent or anything like that. Really kind of dove back into some of my passions from my major at Penn State. I was an advertising and graphic design major. So kind of digging back into, the creativity. I did photography for my first couple of years as I transitioned out of the NFL. And then now I've kind of dove headfirst into being an entrepreneur and just starting too many businesses, basically, is what it comes down to. So, like you mentioned, into the Web3 and NFT blockchain space with a company called TradeWorks that launched the Whitelist NFT project. And then have a holistic wellness company called Magic Wellness that I own and operate here in Denver, Colorado. And then have the photography business too. So
keeping it going, man.
Some real estate, but
love it. Yeah. Love it. Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think so. I probably never labeled it as such, but as in college, I was somebody that was, hey, you want me to make a poster for you. So I had the graphic design, skill set. So I would grab pictures and make posters for different guys on the team. And I think I don't know if I should say this, but I had the Netflix at the time. Your Netflix subscription, you would get DVDs in the mail. So I would, unfortunately, copy DVDs and hand them out, only for a very short period of time. So I realized it was wrong and I stopped doing that.
Well, it's funny you say that because when I first got to Penn State and I remember, I'm probably dating myself, but the first iPods had come out, and I don't even know if Joy remembers, right. But I remember I loaded it up with a hard drive of all the music from you. It was like 20,000 songs. Go. I was like, oh man, we're good. Like, so, right. Yeah, that's consistent.
Right.
No, that's awesome. Like, did you have a sense before it was going to be over, or was it like a surprise when you were like, all right, I'm gonna move on to the next thing? Because I think that purgatory or that right. People falling kind of like hurts that transition a little bit instead of trying to accelerate into the next piece or getting into those gap development right. aspects to feel confident and revert back to your athletic instincts, right? To be able to be competitive and be confident in what you're doing in that next step.
Right. Yeah. No, fortunately for me, I definitely retired on my own terms. In terms of the actual like transition, time wise, is probably my last, during my last training camp is when I was like, okay, this is going to be my last year. Like, unfortunately, I think some of that showed in my play. Okay. In my last year on the field. It didn't really show in my effort, but the way things turned out, showed in my play just a little bit. but I had already started to transition into photography a little bit. My wife, girlfriend at the time, had bought me a camera for my birthday, so I started to like I was a guy that was taking pictures like on a road game, everybody in their suits in front of the plane. They're like, "Hey Jordan, can you get a flick of me and Peyton real quick?" So I would actually take pictures as we got onto the plane. I would pop my laptop open, stick the memory card in, and edit pictures real quick before we even took off, like in that little 10-minute period where everybody's getting situated. And I would send everybody their pictures so they could post them on social media, right before we took off. And that was, while I was playing. So I was a player, I wasn't a photographer.
Right.
But that definitely transitioned me into, my first couple years after playing was full time, me and my wife shooting photography. So
that's amazing how you started. Yeah, you start enacting those things while you're playing. And that's very interesting because you talk about, wanting to be an entrepreneur, just going back to your just true passions. And I always see that, whether it was like when we were in college, Mike Robb interviewing people, right? Like him doing the broadcast journalism, then seeing him go to NFL Network, or even Spice when he used to come back. And it was like, he was act like not say a clown, but he was entertaining back then. But you see where he's at now, and just always trying to figure out those pieces or those crumbs from when you're going through the process. Because like you said, you were always a creative to an extent, and diving into that in the NFL, like taking pictures of the Denver Broncos with Peyton Manning, like those are some pretty high profile pictures when you think about it, like just the digital assets that you can capture and give you probably the confidence to even do a business afterwards. Right. Like, I took pictures of the top players out here. Was that like a key to getting on the right track during the transition, you think? Was like that time that you kind of started splitting your brain, like, all right, I know I'm playing football, I'm getting ready for a game, but I can still take these pictures and do what I need to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Later on in my career, as I felt more comfortable on the field, more comfortable with playbooks and my abilities and all and things like that, it freed up more time for me to be able to do those things and re-identify what those passions are. And it looks like a lot of different things, right? If your passion is football, then what does that look like? Post-career, does that mean that during your football career, you should be volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club and doing football camps and, coaching, or not coaching, but volunteering your time to, to help young kids learn the game? For me, it looked like picking up a camera and learning how to, shoot photography. So, I think it definitely helped. It really came down to identifying what that passion piece for me was and what it was going to be after the game.
Most definitely. With that, following up on that, what was the hardest part of that transition to from player to entrepreneur, right? Like when you finally were like, all right, this is the hat that I'm wearing. I'm not playing football anymore. Like, I'm going to do my photography. What are the main obstacles that you had to overcome?
Yeah, I'm still overcoming some of those obstacles. I think the main one is just the structure of organized sports at a high level was very comforting to me. Knowing that I was going to go to the weight room at this time, go to meetings at this time, and that the goal for me bench pressing this amount is so that I can bench press this amount the next time I go in there. Going to practice and having a call sheet of every single play that's going to be called in practice. Those things don't quite transition to being a photographer, especially with your spouse. If we were going to shoot, and this happened several times, if we're going to shoot a wedding, I'm like, hey babe, you need every single shot that you're going to take. You need it on a little card that's attached to your belt buckle so that you can just check them off as you go. You need, how many memory cards do you have? You need 6 memory cards just in case one fails. You need 18 batteries in your left pocket so that I'm just way too much, not just for, my relationship with my wife. That's definitely too much for a successful relationship. But from a business standpoint, it's just, I was being way too intense for what it takes to be a photographer. even an entrepreneur in general, there's not many situations just that you need that intensity, like where you need, when you step into the lines of a football field on a Sunday night, you need mind, body, soul, everything just there, present, no distract. Like you need to be there. To catch a punt in the NFL, you need to be all there. But I haven't found much else that you need that much focused intensity. And I don't know if there is anything else.
No, that's a great point. That's a great point that you're saying, because I used to compare it to where like there's a level of, like you said, the emotional aspect, the tactical stuff of playing football, like kind of what you're saying, like your senses are heightened so much so that it's really hard to transition and not bring that same type of fervor to anything that you're doing. But sometimes once you can learn how to control it, right, where there's confidence in what you're doing and like, okay, this is how it is, because everything reverts back to football, and it's like that's not always there. I remember the first time I got a CC'd on an email, and I'm like, wait, you don't trust me? What's going on? Like, that's not what we do. You don't go tell the coach after we discuss. Like, we're on it. It's us. Right? But you started discovering the different things, and Dion talked about it. Was that lack of fear of the unknown or being able to even get better, right? Just dealing with Glassdoor with another company I'm dealing with, and they're trying to go about it with having a radical transparency in their culture, right? So just seeing how everyone else is performing, how everyone else is being paid, and just like that critical advantage of an athlete. Like when you get done performing, putting your heart and soul out there, like an artist, like a photographer, right? I'm an artist and I'm creative about my stuff. Like in football, that's the same thing. And then you're going in there and you're being judged or being corrected amongst your peers. So everyone kind of knows where everyone stands. You kind of have a respect level for what's what. There's like a line that you can't cross about dealing with your stuff. But like stepping outside of that, you have to like formulate it differently, because just the construct outside of football is different. But there's a lot of advantages once you get it in place.
Absolutely.
So I love that you said that, like, because you think, all right, if I'm hitting all the stuff that I'm doing in football, it's just going to be just as efficient outside. It's just like not all the time. I mean, I'm running into that. I've had run into that sometimes, but I'm getting better as well.
It's a different culture, right? That that definitely gives a lot of advantage, I think, to having been an athlete, and just the way you approach tasks and getting the tasks done promptly, like things like that. At some points, honestly, I've had higher expectations from people than maybe I should have, just because of, a sports background too. Like, this is your role, I play wide receiver. This is what I do. I'm going to do only this and do it well. That I found that it doesn't always translate into, a corporate structure, one-to-one.
You're absolutely right. It's just like finding those gaps to kind of fill in with that, like you say, that passion or what you're kind of curated to do to an extent. Did you have any college connections that helped you through that transition process, or when you started to become an entrepreneur? Like, was there connections back to Penn State and from the strategic partnerships to kind of build what you were building? I know you were a photographer with your wife, but once you started to scale. There was always contacts, right? I mean, first of all, our alumni network is huge, one of the biggest in the nation. So, once I picked up a camera, I remember, reaching out to Nabil Mark, who was one of the local photographers in State College, who my family became friends with from being local there. But he gave me just the quick ones and twos of how do you operate a camera? He got me off the ground. There's just been tons of networking opportunities, and for me, it's mostly been on LinkedIn. Even if I don't know who that individual is, who to reach out to, I usually look for the Penn State alum tag on LinkedIn and say, ping somebody with that. No, that's good. That's a key for guys that do go to Penn State. Look for that, and it does open doors. So we talk about the creative aspect from your standpoint, and that was your passion, and now you but grown into having your own NFT community. Can you give me a little overview of the Whitelist ACEs and the listeners so they can get involved and learn more about it?
Sure. So the Whitelist ACEs is a membership and lifestyle brand, really. So these ACE characters, we call ourselves ACEs, are a piece of art that you can purchase, which also represents your membership. And the membership benefits are all sports related for the most part. It's access to sporting events, to VIP kind of sports experiences. And really what the cool thing is with this membership and it being done through NFTs is that the members get a say in what happens. So we sold all these NFTs back in January. 10,000 NFTs were all sold. So I don't have any NFTs to sell anyone. If you want one, you actually have to buy them from somebody that owns them. But what we did was create a big treasury that the members vote on, how it gets invested, how it gets spent, how it gets saved, whatever. So one thing that we did recently was acquire a Big Three basketball team. And the Big Three basketball league is a league started by Ice Cube, 3-on-3 basketball, mostly former NBA guys, some guys that probably will transition back into the NBA, after a quick summer stint in the Big Three basketball league. Guys like Mario Chalmers, Michael Beasley. We acquired the team called Power, which is captained by Cuttino Mobley, who was a player that I looked up to and wanted to be like on the basketball court growing up. Him and Steve Francis played together in Houston. So yeah, that's kind of the Whitelist in a nutshell. Our members actually voted on us acquiring, this Big Three Power basketball team with our treasury, which is pretty cool.
That's extremely cool, man. Even from the standpoint of just the sports partnerships in the game that I'm playing, I saw you guys did a deal with a WNBA player.
Right.
And just like with everything going to NIL and just making that transition into that space, I mean, like the community purchasing the Big Three, I love the league, not the league concept, but just the league business model. When I was at the XFL, yeah. That was just one of the fan engaging models that we looked at, and just to see what they were building over there is actually very impressive. Like, and it's kind of under the radar, but like for you guys to go in there and purchase a team is very visionary, and it's pretty tight, especially in that NFT community and how you got the community together. So kudos to that. I mean, that's really tight. What's your strategy with the sports partnerships? I mean, this is a little off topic, but I mean, it's on topic, but like signing individual players.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, well, first of all, we're definitely learning some things as we go, right? It's such a new space, but so the Whitelist itself, the community, the membership, it's really structured more as like a nonprofit, not a charity, but a nonprofit whose any revenue, whether it be from Big Three, whether it be from merchandise, any revenue really just goes back into that treasury in order to provide more benefits to the community, to our membership. So it's pretty interesting when we start to look at relationships with individual athletes, whether it be De'Erica Hamby, who's that WNBA player, and giving her opportunities to create NFTs and create value for her, for her community, for her followers and fans, like on a personal level. But the cool thing with our membership, we have like about 4,000 members worldwide, is that if we do bring somebody on as an ambassador like De'Erica Hamby, or an NIL opportunity, that individual is immediately getting 4,000 fans, 4,000 people that may not have known who they were before, or may not have watched the WNBA before either, but they're immediately engaged. They're immediately like, oh, De'Erica Hamby is one of us. Oh, I'm gonna watch this WNBA game. I'm gonna retweet her tweets. So there's a lot of value in that, right? And so looking for the right opportunities from an individual athlete standpoint is going to be really cool, and we're continuing to do that. And it gives a lot of, kind of social equity from like a social media standpoint. A lot of value there to that individual athlete just by, gaining, thousands of fans kind of overnight if they, decide to be a part of our community.
I love it, man. It's ingenious. When you just talk about like these different collectives that are coming out, or even, I mean, I see a collaboration just to throw it out there in the ecosystem, but like with Lockdown U in the Whitelist, right? Which is a Lockdown U, which is the group license that we're creating at Penn State around the DBs, and first implementation of like the Blue White Collective, which is like sports properties and brands in a group licensing structure to kind of have that authentically curated space within sports property, for example, Penn State, and kind of identifying those and matching up with those different, opportunities and different things of that nature. But I love where you're going with everything, because there's a lot of value in that. And it's a gap in the industry when you just talk about NIL space, athletes just getting exposure, and just the level of community, right? When you're talking about building your network outside of sports, or like most people that kind of know what you're doing, or entrepreneur endeavors in the future.
Right.
So let's talk about your process a little bit. How do you know when you're ready to jump into like a new business venture, like especially innovative and new spaces like an NFT community?
Oh man. At this point, it's mostly asking my wife if I'm allowed to be perfectly frank. I mean, my mind is like 1,000 miles per hour. I've probably thought of a couple of businesses during our call just now, and a couple more partnerships that, I should go after. But, I mean, it's really identifying, what is the end game here? Like, what am I trying to get to? And is this business that I'm trying to start, is this, project, or, is this pushing me towards that kind of end goal, the end game? And that's really what I've been drilling into here, lately. I would love to be able to give a lot more time to my kids and, coach them in sports as they grow up. So am I creating a structure within my entrepreneurship that supports that, or am I just putting a lot more on my plate that's not going to allow me to do that? Because as most entrepreneurs would say, a 9-to-5 isn't for me. So instead I work 24/7. Right. So,
That's a fact.
So it's being an entrepreneur has its benefits. But at the same time, it's absolute that you have some guardrails in place that are guiding you towards, some sort of goal. And it's usually time related, right? Usually entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs because they want some time back. So you got to make sure that at some point you get that time back. Cause for a while there I was working, 15-hour days for 6 months straight. And I was like, this, why don't I just get a 9-to-5 and I'll have this time that I'm seeking. So, so it's really about time.
That's a great point that you make, where it's just like I'm 2 years into the entrepreneur game, and like just that balance is a real thing, right? Because like there's a level when you start stacking those bricks at the beginning, like you said, it's like, oh, this seems worth it. And it's like when I do that too, I'm like, all right, let's go up this Mount Everest. Like I really enjoy getting to the top of mountains, right? Whether it's hiking or whatever the case may be. So there is something, once you deem the top of the mountain worthy of going up, like I found myself in that too. It's like, man, how many things am I doing? Like, all right, let's kind of condense it. So I love the fact that you said that, because that's the point we all want to get back, is time, and trying to maximize that time going through the sports ecosystem, because you take up so much of your time giving in there. So using that as an acceleration point to kind of go from where you're going and not taking a step back and kind of falling off the wagon and different things. So that's exactly what we're trying to do here. So we know that the entrepreneurial path isn't for everyone, right? What type of athlete do you think should follow your path or look into the entrepreneurial route?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question. I think being an entrepreneur, especially if you're going into businesses where you have people reporting to you, have employees, that's a little bit different than being an entrepreneur as a photographer, who's, I'm a one-man show, or it's me and my wife, even, that's the team, that's it. It's a lot different than where I am now, and actually, being in a leadership role and, having to, direct and have team meetings and lead those meetings. and things like that. So, I do think that it starts with a want to. If you're an athlete that, has never been a team captain, but sees themselves as a leader and wants to be a leader, then, there might be some skill sets that you need to learn or don't know yet that you need to learn. Like even for myself, I was never a team captain, at Penn State. It's something that, I don't know if I necessarily wanted to be or not. Let's put it that way. But right now I'm in a position to lead and, need to be vocal. Like if I was a leader at Penn State, it wasn't a vocal one. It was somebody that led by example and all that. So learning that has been good.
I appreciate you saying that, because I definitely viewed you. I mean, like you say, you weren't a captain. I wasn't a captain at Penn State, but I viewed you as somebody that kind of beats their own drum in an admirable way, right? Like it's like,
Sure.
All right, does it really matter what's going on? Like Jordan's going to do what Jordan's going to do. Like there's a level of like believing in your ideas, doing what you need
Sure.
to do, regardless of what. And I admired it because like that's how I operate. So it's like that level of, whether it's the vocal leader, sometimes in football, that typecast of like, oh, this is what a leader looks like. Someone that's yelling, someone that's doing this, and just I thought that was something that was cool at Penn State, that everyone can you had to have a level of self-sacrifice to kind of get within. So you really had to kind of find your place within there and be comfortable in your skin, to be completely honest. Right. That's why you see a lot of guys who were clean cut there, and then we leave and the gambit's all over, but everyone's very specific to who they are. Like they know self to an extent. Like, and I always appreciate that. And I think that's kind of what you're pointing out. And because I had that, like, I guess it would be imposter syndrome. Like I wasn't a captain. I'm not a leader. So all that. So I need to do something that's just solo instead of like kind of getting to the point where you so photographer to like building community. Now it's like, I got to lead these people with decisions and different things of that nature. So I love that, man. So you did so much in your career, obviously, man, continue to go at this young age as an entrepreneur, executive, the whole nine. What's the career end goal?
Oh man. I mean, the end goal is like I said, to have my days be, filled with the joy of my wife and kids. And, hopping on a meeting here and there to, just check some things off. But, yeah, I mean, honestly, I would love to, pour back into my community, and by my community, having moved around so much growing up, really trying to make Denver into, a place that I can call home, that, my kids can call home. Like we support our Broncos and Rockies and Nuggets, right? Like have a home team, which I never had growing up. So I'm excited to make this place home, and from a business standpoint, hopefully I can scale the businesses that I have right now into whether it's real estate or the NFTs and blockchain businesses, scale them to a point where I can be more hands off and again really just enjoy time with my family and friends and travel.
That's it, man. And that's a great end goal there, and that makes all the work worth it at the end of the day. Being an entrepreneur and going through it, like that's kind of what pushes you to do the 16-hour day. So don't lose track of that, man. Just really appreciate you, Jordan, jumping on to the Blue Chip Academy. A lot of gems in the blueprint, right? Everyone's path doesn't start the same. Everyone's critical transition points aren't the same, but it's just the critical factors of what you go through, right? Kind of understanding your passions, understanding what you're passionate about when you're transitioning out of the game into maybe an entrepreneurial spirit or into corporate America, whatever that case may be. And just remember looking for the information when you're going through the process so you can set yourself up for success, right? That's one thing that he talked about going through there. He had a critical advantage of being a coach's kid, understanding the business, and just the more you can do in the range that he brought to every organization, being a desirable asset, which makes him be able to say that, hey, I was 5'10", 170, ran 4'6", and played 8 years in the NFL. So there's a lot of things when you see those different measurables and things of that nature, like kind of find out what are the critical factors that make those things happen that you can kind of implement now because the business starts 13, 14 years old. So that would be it. And guys, remember, like and subscribe this video and download the recruiting checklist. And anytime we got the football business masterclass, and again, doing free consults if you have any needs or frustrations in the recruiting process, just need a little bit of guidance. Holler, we'll put the link at the bottom. Jordan, thank you so much for jumping onto the Blue Chip Academy podcast, man.
Hey, thanks a lot
Signing
for
out.
it's great to catch up with you, man. Thanks for having me.